For the next part of our shader, I'm going to reconnect the 2D gradient directly to the diffuse, so we're not getting a mix. So I actually can see the precise colors of the gradient. And to visualize what will happen next, I need to temporarily change the colors in my gradient. So I'll set a yellowish color and a reddish color. Actually, let me just undo that. I'll set the color 1 to a reddish color. Okay, if I move these a little closer together, let's see if I can bring the shader in somewhat. Just going to bring some of the red right around these leaf edges. What I want to do is just kind of get rid of this bullseye pattern here. And the way I can do that is, again, to use some of the texture space controllers to warp my UV projection. If I cancel out, I can actually use the 3D warp to drive a distortion in the UV coordinates. I can use an incidence shader to drive the scale of the effect, and of course the incidence shader will help me because we're using the surface to camera, so the normals that are facing me more directly when the leaf is bent will be warped. So I'm actually using the fold operator to help me drive the incidence of the scale of this effect. So I'll start off by pulling these two shaders into my graph, and the 3D warp needs to be driven by some texture coordinates. So the texture coordinates I'm going to use, of course, are the result of my texture projection lookup I did, and the result can be used to drive the warp. So the warp just offsets in the X and the Z, or the U and the V plane. And now I'm going to take the incidence and use it to drive the scale of the effect. So it's just giving me the ability, again, to offset anywhere on the UV surface of my mesh. So I like this as my starting point. And again, I am using surface to camera as my mode to calculate incidence. So if I was to move forward, I'll just minimize this for a moment. We just get that moving over the surface. So it actually helps it stick. So the next thing that we really need to look at doing is to warp the actual transitions between the colors themselves. They're, again, just too even. So to do this, we can go and use one of the texture space controllers, and a kaleidoscopic controller will help us to take the result of the gradient and how it's projected onto our object, and then we're able to add in a number of offsets. We can change the angle that it's been rotated to and the number of reflections, basically using like an alternate UV and generating kaleidoscopic patterns where the gradient was concerned. So I'm going to actually take the kaleidoscope, and again, it needs a set of coordinates to drive it, so I'll use the same texture coordinates from the texture projection and then use it to drive the noise coordinates. So now if I double click on the kaleidoscope, I have the operators for the kaleidoscope, the attributes to edit, and now I can go and specify the angle and the number of reflections the shader might have. I can modify the incidence. And sort of find that sweet spot. So that works out kind of well. Let me just see if I can unplug a couple things here. I'm actually going to go back to the scale. I try driving the effect a little more like, maybe like that.